2 weeks ago, we started in the section we're dealing with Paul helping the Corinthians understand spiritual gifts. And remember that this is chapters 12, 13, and 14 together make up one big, if you will, discussion, argument. And we saw that just like he did in chapters 8, 9, and 10, sometimes it appears like there's just a whole bunch of separate topics. As a matter of fact, next week we're going to be looking at chapter 13, the love chapter, and we just pull it all out of its context, and yet that whole dialogue sits right smack in the middle of his discussion on spiritual gifts. So what we're going to do is understand how all of these things fit together. Now, if you remember last time, we kind of looked at the beginning of sort of his premise for his arguments about spiritual gifts. And remember, we're not trying to take this out of its context to what Paul is trying to teach the Corinthians. Now, there are larger contexts of talking about spiritual gifts, but we're trying to deal with them as Paul is dealing with them with the Corinthians. And when we place it in that proper context, then we understand a lot more clearly, and it cuts down on a lot of the, well, it could mean this, it could mean this, it could mean this, it could mean this. Because if you're discussing something with somebody, you're going to try to stick in your context, right? You don't just go, hey, well, I remember the letter that I'm going to write in 6 years. Let's drag that into this discussion. So right now we're trying to deal with the issues. Now, so some of the things that remember we've seen the Corinthians have a difficult time with is, if you will, them thinking they're spiritually mature, right? And there's the pride that goes along with it, a bit of the arrogance. They think they've arrived. We remember that a lot of the social background they have, the sort of the haves and have-nots, the Greco-Roman culture that came into play. There's all those different dynamics that are playing into this. And what do you think happens when you're used to that kind of a thinking in your normal life? And remember, these believers are 3 years old, if you will. What do you think is going to tend to happen with people who come from that kind of a background, and then God's providing all of these gifts? What's the natural tendency for people to do? There's no natural tendency? Come on, I know there's a natural tendency.
My gift is better than yours.
My gift is better than yours. There it is, yeah. In other words, hey, this is the gift that's really cool. This is the exciting one. This is the one that's more important. Because what are they used to? They're used to having a society that's stratified, and the people are more important than the other ones. Remember, we saw that same dynamic going on with the Lord's Supper. You guys have all this stuff, and you don't wait, and you don't care, and you're not paying attention, and you got your brothers and sisters coming late, and they don't have anything, and you don't care, right? The whole same type of attitude. So what we're seeing here, we're seeing that same dynamic going on with spiritual gifts. And again, Paul is not correcting them that says, well, there aren't this spiritual gift or that spiritual gift. He's dealing with it from a context of, you guys need to understand the gifts and what they're supposed to be used for, how they're supposed to be used. And last time we saw him sort of set that whole premise up. And does anybody remember, if we could summarize his premise as to what these gifts are to be for?
Edification of the church.
Edification of the church. In other words, whatever you have, it's not about you. It's not about how cool you are. It's not about anything else. It's about edification of the body. And we're going to see he's going to continue that on, but he's going to now talk about it in the second part of this chapter, in verses 12 through 31, is the application and diversity of the gifts. In other words, we know that the Spirit dispenses them just as he will, and he's going to tell us about that God has so ordained it this way. In other words, here's how it's arranged. The Spirit gives as he wills, but this is how God has put things together. And just by understanding that already tells us a lot about what's going to happen. Now, the fact that there are diversity of gifts and there's a necessity for the diversity of gifts, these are the kinds of things that already should clue us in to the fact that, does everybody have the same gift? No. Should everybody have the same gift? No. Right. So in other words, if everybody was the same, boring, non-functional, yeah. And so what that already says is, if you guys recognize and understand gifts properly, and you understand, like Randy said, that the purpose of these gifts is to the edification of the body, your whole perspective on how things are going to be used and perceived and interacted is going to be very different than it's about me and how cool I am and what's going on, right? Completely different view. Even if you understand the gifts, even if you use them, quote unquote, you don't understand how to use them for the proper purpose. And again, as you've noticed, as we've gone through this book, this letter, Paul has done very little correction on doctrine. He's done a whole lot of correction on application, though. He says, yeah, you guys get it. Yep, that's a gift. That's cool. But you don't understand what you're doing with it. And we're going to see some more that comes out this morning. So, again, that's just kind of setting the bigger picture. And then at the end of this, we're going to see that he's going to point us to chapter 13. And hopefully you're going to see why chapter 13 is smack dab in the middle of this discussion on spiritual gifts. Because chapter 14 then picks up with, let me give you some examples. Let me explain to you. Now let me show you how this should be done. Right? Because he sets the premise, he gives the application, he gives the bigger picture and context, then he gives some more example, personal example, and then he does the correctiveness. And that's what he continues to follow that pattern through this letter. So, excuse me. Let's go ahead and begin in verse 12. And this verse 12 and 13, this is a subsection, one body, many members. For just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For in one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slave or free, and all were made to drink of one Spirit. Now again, I could spend an entire lesson just going through all the options of how this all can fit together. But again, to keep the flow, I'm going to sort of give you what I think is probably the best answer of how this all fits together. But if you notice here, he starts off, he says, for just as one as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one, so it is with Christ. So if you notice here, he is recognizing, and he's using this analogy of a body. I'll talk about that in a second. But he's using this to say, look, there is one body, and one body has many members. And though there are many members, it's still one body. And he's going to bring that back to what's the context of this one body? That one body is the body of Christ. Okay. And what we have to realize is that this is a recognition of individuality and also oneness. Okay? And I know that it's really funny. We tend to, in life in general, we tend to sort of resonate with one thing or another. Oh, it's all about the body. Oh, it's all about me. And we kind of get locked in on, well, is it about the body or about me? And the answer is yes. Okay? But it's sometimes hard to be able to reconcile how those things work together. How those things are fitted. Does that make sense? How do I fit into the whole, but it's about the whole, and yet God has also gifted me? And we're going to see how Paul's going to try to help them understand that dichotomy. But if they began with a premise that it's just about the body, or it's just about me, what possible errors could happen if they fail to recognize that it's both?
They could go one way or the other.
Yeah, they're going to run one way or another. If it's all about the body, and that's it, then that subverts the fact that God has individually gifted individual peoples, right? Mm-hmm. And then that sort of creates that uniform mush. Remember, I talked a while back about, you have the color, the painting, and you have all these beautiful colors, and then you say, like with the kindergartner, let's mix them all together because I like blue and purple and red and green and yellow. And what do you end up with? Brown, And it ends up being a mud because there is no differentiation. Conversely, if it's all about me and my stuff, you forget your context and your place, and then it starts becoming about you. And if everybody's not like you, or you're not like them, or they've got this gift and I don't, you miss the point of why you even have it. And so this whole dynamic is really important to set that context. And so Paul, again, says, now you understand what the purpose of it is, but the purpose of it is within the context of individuals within the members of the body. And what's interesting here is this analogy of linking it to the body. A lot of us look at it and say, well, good, here's this analogy of the body. I mean, outside of the Bible, how often do you hear that analogy used? You don't, right? Not very often. Well, and you go, well, this must be a biblical concept. Well, it is. But Paul also is using something very familiar to the Corinthians. This analogy of a body and members and helping and rejoicing and hurting and all the other kinds of things are used in several frameworks. One in particular in politics. The Greeks and Romans utilized this concept of unity within a body and members of the body. And if these people are hurting, those other people, the body is hurting type of analogy. So in the political system of the day, this is a common analogy. And you have to realize that there's also the background within religious groups and all of understanding how a body and many members fit together. So Paul's not trying to create a new analogy. He's trying to take a concept that they're very familiar with and say, and here's how it works in Christ. Okay? I mean, as Christians, we understand this idea of body and all, but we understand it from the Christian perspective. Our society, if you start trying to explain it that way, it would be very difficult for some people. I mean, it's not a great stretch, but it's not a common used analogy. Paul is using something that's very familiar to them to help them understand now in Christ, it's different, and yet it's the same analogy. Does that make sense? You realize analogies can use the same analogy but have a completely different understanding to them? That's what Paul's doing. He's saying, let me give you the Christian understanding of individuals and unity, but this is in Christ because that's what he says. So it is with Christ. He says you have many members, individuals, but one body, and that's Christ. So he now says, I want you to think of this in terms of everything we're talking about is in the body of Christ. And in the body of Christ, that's the euphemism or the analogy of the church, the called out ones, and in particular, a local assembly, in this particular case, because that's who he's talking to. How does this local assembly work? And yet, we realize that all the gifts across all the churches and all the people are still Christ using it for his church, if you will, universally. So it works at a universal level and it works at a local level. And so he sets this up. And it says, for in one spirit we are all baptized into one body. Now you can go all to town on, is this spiritual baptism? Is this water baptism? Is this whatever baptism? The whole idea of baptism in general, and from a Christian view, and even from their perspective, was you were all part and identified with something. That's what baptism did. Let me show you. I'm purified, I've changed, I'm different, I'm associating myself with Christ in particular here. And how was that done? Well, through faith, through the Spirit. You're baptized into Christ, etc. So he again says, why are you part of this? Why are you as an individual part of this body? Well, you're an individual part of this body because of this action of the Spirit. Hey, and are we talking about spiritual gifts? Yeah, so he starts bringing in and says, let me help you understand that it's because of the Spirit himself that you're part of this body. You're still an individual, but you're part of this body through the work of the Spirit. And what has the Spirit been doing? Giving gifts, just as he wills. All right? So you can see he's bringing all these concepts together. And he says, Jews, and it says, Jews or slaves, Jews or Greeks, slaves or free, all were made to drink of one Spirit. Now, some people point this back to chapter 11 and say, see, they're drinking from the communion and all this other kind of stuff. Paul's just trying to say, what's giving you life? What's making you're drinking from the same Spirit, if you will. He's not trying to go off into Neverland. He's trying to say, Where's your life? What's the thing that's sustaining you? The Spirit. But if you notice here, he says, Greeks or Jews, slave or free. Why did he toss those in there? By the way, he doesn't throw male and female in there. In this particular one, there's a reason though. Why would he leave out male or female? Because he does use it elsewhere, but he says Jews or Greeks, slaves or free. Why would he call those particular things out in this context?
As a classification of people?
Okay, classification of people. So the first classification is a Jew or a Greek. Okay, in other words, if you're not a Jew, you're a Greek. All right? And he says, so all people. So every one of you, no matter whether you're a Jew, whether you're a Greek, where you come from, what your background is, all of us are in this one body by the Spirit. All right? Now, why does he say slave or free?
It doesn't matter whether you are free or not. Pretty much.
Okay, it doesn't matter, but think about the context of the Corinthians. Why would he call this out? Yeah, that rich or poor, that status thing. In other words, these guys think, well, I'm free, I'm wealthy, I'm powerful. Well, and these guys are slaves. He says, no. You can't put this class distinction within this body. There is no class distinction in this body. And there is no ethnic distinction in this body. They weren't having problems with male and female issues, particularly. So that's part of the reason why he leaves it out. It wasn't women were this and men were that. Yeah, there was some trouble with some of the ladies doing some things and some of the men not doing some things. But the principal distinctions were social and ethnic. Does that sound familiar to you? We don't have any of those problems, do we? We're called people, right? So what do? We do the same thing, social or ethnic. And so he says, look, it doesn't matter where you come from, how educated you are, how free or powerful or wealthy or your ethnicity or anything. All of us are in this body, and we're all individual members of it. So you need to put this as your framework of thought when we start talking about these gifts and how they're used. Is this all making sense? So he has to set that context. If you take it out of that context, there's all sorts of problems that are going to come out of it, isn't it? And what do the Corinthians have? Problems because they're not sitting in that context of thought. So, one body, many members. Now we come to the next section, 14 through 20, and this is the necessity of the diversity of gifts in the members. Excuse me. For the body does not consist of one member, but many. All right, so he comes back and he says, all right, remember this. If the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would be the sense of hearing? If the whole body were an ear, where would be the sense of smelling? But as it is, God arranged the members of the body, each one of them, as he chose. If all were a single member, where would be the body? As it is, there are many parts, yet one body. Now, why does he go through that explanation?
Because he wants them to understand it in context rather than taking it all out like they like to do.
Okay, it's got to be understood within its context, true. But look at what his arguments are. His first argument is, okay, many members, one body. If the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I do not belong to the body. Now, why would he toss that out there? Again, this is an analogy that he's trying to apply to them. So what's the analogy there?
If I'm not an elder or a deacon, I'm not part of the body. Or if I'm not someone in some sort of position within the church, I'm not part of the body.
Yeah, if my role or who I am or what I do or what gift I have, I can't say that I'm this and therefore I'm not part of the body because I'm not something else, right? So his first thing, it says a hand is part of the body, basically. The premise is you know your hand's part of your body. And just because you say I'm a hand doesn't mean that I'm not part of the body, right? But you are a hand. So you as an individual A hand can't say you're not part of the body because you are. And he goes on the same thing about if an ear, because I'm not an eye, I'm not part of the body. So he's basically saying, look, because you're not something else doesn't mean you're any less part of the body. And because you are something doesn't mean you're any less part of the body. How many people go, as to Jonathan's point, well, I'm not a teacher, so what can I do around here? You realize teaching is just one gift. Pastors just have one role. And you know enough about the pastors of this church to know that we're all different in our skills and abilities. And our gifting, if you will. What we're good and not good at. We all strive to be better and be more Christ-like, but God just put us together certain ways. And God put each and every one of the members of the body in the body for a purpose. And you can't say, because I'm not this, I'm not part of the body. Or because I'm that, I'm not part of the body. You are. You're in Christ. You're baptized in the Spirit. You drink of the same Holy Spirit, if you will. You're part of the body. So don't think because you're not something else that you're not part of the body. So he says, all right, so there has to be, conclusion, there's got to be diversity in it. And he says, and he goes on in verse 7, if the whole body were an eye, where would be the sense of hearing? If the whole body were an ear, where would be the sense of smell? In other words, we all cannot be the same. Now, when we get to chapter 13, we all can. But when it comes to this, we can't. It wouldn't work. How many times have you ever been to a church where we all have to look the same way, dress the same way, talk the same way, know the same stuff, go to the same classes? This is the way it is. You know, we all, man, everybody is a perfect little clone. That's cloning. That's not being part of a body. Because every one of you has a unique giftedness to serve and to be edifying to this body. So it doesn't matter what it is, you're part of it. Because we all can't be. I mean, okay, everybody wants to be a teacher. Let's all sit down over here and start teaching. Who's going to be the ones listening? I don't know. Wait a second, you got to have the diversity.
Too many chiefs, no Indians.
Yeah, too many chiefs, no Indians. And I argue enough with myself. I don't need any extra arguing. Is that really right? Wait a second, It says, but, now if you notice here, it says, but as it is, God arranged the members of the body, each one as he chose. Now, if you are dissatisfied with what you are and who you are and what gifts you have, who are you arguing with? God. He says, I made you this way for the purpose to edify this body. So I have a purpose for you. Do you ever doubt that? He has given you a purpose and a function in this body. And if you say, well, I can't be used here. Yes, you can. You should be. And it may be something as simple as, I'm on the prayer chain and I can pray every day. All of us can do that. It may be that you can cook. It may be you can clean. It may be that you can teach. It may be you can watch the kids. Maybe, we got greeters here, Put a smiling face and welcome somebody. You can sing. You can do music. You can do whatever. God has said, I have chosen to put you here. Now, that's just in a generic sense. But in particular, when he comes back to spiritual gifts, he says, and whatever gifting I've given you, I've given it to you, and I have so arranged it that pleases me. And so the question is, are we pleasing God with what he has given to please himself to edify the body? That's the question we really have to ask. We can't say, I'm not this, therefore I'm not part of the body, and I'm not that kind of, so I can't be useful. He says, no, God put it this way. Isn't that cool? To know that everything about you God has ordained and put together and gifted to serve him exactly where he has you at that time to his glory, to the edification of the body. So there's no question of whether you have giftedness. You do. There's no question of whether you can't serve. You can. Sometimes we have to find it. Sometimes we have to look at it a little more closely, which is what we're going to do. We're going to see here in a second. Because he says, if all were a single member, where would be the body? As it is, there are many parts, yet one body. So he says, clearly, we have to be diverse. No question, no doubt. So let me ask you this. In their context, and if you've ever seen it in a church, what happens when one particular thing is exalted above all others? So that's going to set up here in a second. A disaster, yeah. Pride, distortion. Yeah, things get skewed out of place, right? You know, and there are churches who have, I'll call it personalities and bents that may be oriented one way or oriented another way. But what's the danger of, yes, God may be strengthening this church to be able to serve in this particular capacity more strongly, and maybe not as much in this one. What happens if that church now starts thinking that this is our thing? Pride, yeah. This is who we are, and boy, the rest of you guys just don't get it.
You get something weird like the Baptist Riders movement. We're the ones who go along with the bride of Christ, and everyone else is kind of second rate.
Yeah, you get some really weird stuff that starts happening. And so here he said, you know, as it is, there are many parts, yet one body, because all of us can't be the same. We can't be. And if you start thinking in those terms, like the Corinthians, this is more important, and these are the cool people, and we're better than the other folks in the church, you're going to see that it gives division, which is what he's now going to address next. The necessity, verse 21 through 26. He says, the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. On the contrary, the parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And on the other parts of the body that we think less honorable, we bestow greater honor. And our unrepresentable parts are treated with greater modesty, which our more presentable parts do not require. But God has so composed the body, giving greater honor to that part that lacked it, that there may be no divisions in the body. But the members may have the same care for one another. If one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. Now, there's a lot there, and you have to think really careful about what Paul's trying to say. Because, again, we're dealing with an analogy that's going to work its way out. Now, if you notice here, he starts off with an eye can't say to the hand, and the head can't say to the feet. And it may be stretching too much, but I'll just toss it out for consideration. When you start looking at the way he's using body parts, eye and head versus hands and feet, if you were just saying, how would I categorize that from a giftedness perspective in the church? Eye and head, hands and feet. What image pops in your head? Okay. Leaders are people who are more visible and people who are more serving, right? Hands and feet, eye and head. I don't know whether that's what Paul's trying to get at, but it sure does go, the eye and the head can't say to the hand and the feet, I don't have any need of you. I assure you, forgive me for using this analogy, most pastors have absolutely no concept of what it takes to put on a worship service. I've studied my thing. I walk up, you've already been told how to turn the battery on and stand up there and do your whatever. Stare this way, look at this, and preach, right? Forgive me, it's almost like a wind-up soldier. Okay, you've done your thing, you're ready, boom. Now, all of you who are in the background of those hands and feet, you know what it takes to put together a worship service. Music, audio, video, lighting, greeting, ushers, bulletins, chairs, seating, cleaning, etc., etc., etc. You ever thought about that? That's why we're trying to train the young men to understand that it isn't, hey, let's have a worship service tonight. Really? How are we going to do that? Who's going to be there to, somebody opens the door, turns the heat on, makes sure the lights are there. Does that make any sense? So he's trying to get to the point here and says, guys, just because you're this, you can't say, I don't need that. And again, I'm using the analogy of pastor because I'm a pastor. It's too easy to forget that we need each other. Also, it's like, well, I'm not in the pulpit, so gosh, I'm not of any service. Did you just hear the list of all of the hands and feet that are required to let that one person stand in the pulpit? There's a lot of hands and feet that go into that. There's a lot of giftedness, and most people don't even know it.
And don't even see it.
And don't even see it.
The sound person and the video people, those guys, those people, you never see them, but they're huge.
Yeah, nobody sees it. And guess what he's going to then say? He says, you can't say one to the other, I don't have anything. He says, on the contrary, the parts of the body that seem weaker are indispensable. Indispensable. And the parts of the body we think less honorable, we bestow greater honor, and our unpresentable parts are treated with greater modesty, which the more presentable parts do not require. Now, he's going back to analogy of the body, and forgive me for try to be as delicate as I can. When he's talking about those less honorable parts are indispensable, that I just gave you a beautiful analogy. Yeah, go right ahead and have a worship service without all of those less honored parts. I mean, you always, the guy in the pulpit, what a great sermon. Do you have any idea? I guarantee you, try my voice in that sanctuary without a sound system. Try my voice when I have a voice without a sound system. I'm not a Charles Spurgeon.
One of the most powerful positions in any organization is the cleaning crew.
Yeah,
the building is not clean.
Yeah.
Health and safety will shut you down.
Yeah.
You'll have no building.
Yeah, you won't have anything because it's not cleaned. If you notice what Paul's trying to get here, he says, what you may think is important is critical and indispensable. And then he says, the body has those which are less honorable, we bestow greater honor. Now, he's now moving back to the analogy of a body, and he says in the less presentable parts, that's a euphemism for your things that you cover with underwear. How about that? That's what he's talking about. And he says, so how do you treat those parts of your body? Carefully. Right? With greater care and greater honor. All right? That's what he's trying to say. He says, you understand in your own body, there are parts of your body which you don't go flaunting, but you take care of them really carefully. Forgive me for saying that, but that's what the analogy Paul's using. He's saying, so how do you care about others that you may not show, or they may not be visible? How should you care for those people? And how should they be cared for? They should be taken very good care of. You need to realize that as parts of the body, there are some that are strong and then some that are weak, some that need more care, some that need more support. I mean, the diversity of people in this congregation, from the ones that you can say, hey, how's it going once every 6 years? And they're like, oh, cool, I'm great. To the ones that, you need at least 45 minutes after the service every Sunday. Otherwise, they think you've abandoned them. I'm very different. It's like, really? But people are different. People need to be handled differently. People present differently. There are some people that if we brought them up front and said, hey, so-and-so's just done this wonderful thing, they'd die. I mean, it's like, please shoot me before you do that, right? And they're like, I don't want anybody to see me. So what do you have to do? You don't do that to them. You love them. You don't present them, so to speak. And there's others that can walk up there and you can do whatever you want. They're like, oh, cool, that's great. So they don't need anything special treatment, right? There's nothing special about that. So he's trying to say, do you realize how you handle your own body? This is how we also have to think about the body of Christ, both in how we handle it, how we treat it, how we honor, don't honor, hide, if you will, take care of more carefully. So he's trying to say all of this stuff has to all work together, and you have to realize everybody's different. So our more presentable parts don't require any of that, right? They don't even require it a bit. Cool. But God has so composed the body, giving greater honor to that which lacked it. Now, why does he say that? Think about it, because he's now shifting away from the body analogy of the physical body to the body analogy of the church. Why does he say, but God has composed the body, giving greater honor to the part that lacked it? Or he's going to say why here in a second. What is he trying to say, though?
But the people that are weaker or the people that need more help, people don't take that as seriously, I guess.
Okay. It does deal with people who may or may not need more help. But think of now in Corinth. What did he just say about Jew and Greek and slave and free? What's his context when he says, I've taken those who have less honor and I've so ordained the body and composed it so that they have greater honor?
There's an equality to them. It's not so much, I'm here and you're here.
Okay.
We're all here.
Yeah, he has taken it and said, yeah, you guys in the world are more presentable and everybody knows you and sees you and whatever. And here's the slave and whatever that's doing just their thing. God has so composed the body that the ones that you would think are less important are given greater honor. So what happens is you don't look down on somebody and somebody doesn't become snobby towards you. And you don't go, well, I'm not this, I'm not that. He says, no, I've composed this body that I have ordained it and composed it so everybody has the appropriate honor that they should have. And what is that honor? I'm taking you out of context now. What kind of honor do we all share? Christ. And what are we all called? Saints, sons and daughters, children, joint heirs, brothers and sisters, all part of a family. See? He says, I have taken what in the world is this, and I have done this with it. And it's all in me. It's all in Christ. Because, he says, why did I do that? That, in verse 25, that there may be no division in the body, but that the members may have the same care one for another. He says, so you have to realize I put this all together so there won't be any divisions. Because if there was more important and less important, I don't have this gift and you don't have that thing and all these other kinds of stuff, there would be division. And yet, each of us are individuals too, right? But what I've done in the body is we're all the same in Christ. We may have different gifts, but what are those gifts for? To make us separate? No. So that we all together, as one, all honored appropriately, can use those gifts for what? Division? No. Care one for another. It says, so realize I, as in God, have put this together so that all of us have the same honor in Christ. Have you ever thought about that? You have the exact same honor as a son, a daughter, a joint heir, etc. All of the things that we all have, we're all equal. Jew or Greek, male or female, free or slave, it doesn't matter in Christ. And yet, each and every one of us have been given a particular gift which is necessary to edify each other. See how different, if you notice all the stuff about spiritual gifts, what's really going on here? Because then he's going to show you, now here's how you use those gifts that we've been talking about. So he says, and so therefore, in verse 26, he says, if one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. Now, that's a wonderful statement. And if taken too far, You can get yourself into trouble. Okay, who's miserable today? Okay, well, let's all go mourn with them. Okay, who's rejoicing today? Okay, let's go. You know, is that what he's trying to get at? No, what's he trying to say?
Well, if you got a sore thumb, your body recognizes it, but
Yeah.
the whole body doesn't ache, just your thumb is aching.
Yeah, but the impact of the hurting thumb is going to affect the rest of the body's ability to do things. So let's try to take care of the body. What do you do with your sore thumb? Ignore it? No. It's hurting. Go do something about it. Rest of the body. Take the other hand and use the brain, the eyes. Let's go get a bandage for it. Right? And if you just had a nummy dessert, boy, was that good, right? The rest of the body is going to rejoice in that, right? Ooh, that was cool. Oh, sugar rush, But see, so we can all rejoice. So when something goes great, say praise God and, be excited for him because that's something that's going to help, right? Now, I thought it was interesting, and the reason I put it in the notes here, I want to read this to you. This is Garland quoting another guy quoting Luther. So I didn't even try. I just said it's from Garland's book. But this was interesting. This is how Luther tried to say, here's how you need to think of spiritual gifts. And he actually uses an analogy of the analogies. So it's kind of fun. It says in the middle of page, bottom page 3, it says, the sun does not say that it is black. Okay? The tree does not say, I bear no apples, pears, or grapes. That is not humility. But if you have gifts, you should say, okay? I want to pause right there. Why did Luther say the sun doesn't say it's black and the tree doesn't say I don't produce fruit? And saying that's not humility. I'm sure you've seen this before.
It's like a self-pity.
Okay.
There's almost a pride in the, I don't produce apples and pears and,
Okay, think about it in the other direction.
If you're denying your gifts,
If you're denying your gifts,
then it's to be the good one.
yeah, it's a false humility.
Yeah.
He says, thank you. Well, I don't really do that. The sun doesn't say I don't shine. He doesn't say, I'm black. I don't put out any light. And the tree doesn't say, I don't bear any fruit. That's not humility. That's a false humility. As opposed to saying, I recognize who I am and what I do. And therefore I go do it. And see, too many people in our society say that if you say, I'm good at this, you're prideful. So that means you say, I'm not good at this. That's false humility. That's wrong. Be who God made you and be proud but if you have these gifts, saying this. Look what Luther says. These gifts are from God. I did not confer them on myself. One should not be puffed up on their account. If someone else does not have the gifts I have, then he has others. If I exalt my gift and despise another's, that is pride. So if you notice, don't say you don't have it, because that's false humility. But don't lord it over anybody else, because it wasn't yours to begin with. God gave it to you. And if they don't have it, God's given them something else. And don't say, I'm better than you because I have my gift. That's pride. And don't say, I don't have the gift. That's false humility. And don't put down somebody else because they don't have it, because God's given them something else to do. See how Luther's saying this? Now, this is really cool. He says, the sun does not vaunt himself, though more fair than the earth and the trees. So he's saying, yes, there is a differentiation. But says, although tree, you do not shine, I do not despise you, for you are green, and I will help you be green. See that? That's what it's about. You don't shine, tree, and you're green, and I'm going to help you be greener. That's my job as the sun. It's not about me. And yes, you can't compete with my power or anything else. But my job isn't to be powerful. If I want to melt you, that's not my purpose. If I'm hurting you, that's not my purpose. I want to help you be green, tree, and so you produce fruit. See how? I thought that was a really cool analogy there. So that is what the care in these gifts should be. So now let's quickly finish up this last section, verses 20 through 31, or 27 through 31. And so this is God's appointment of the diversity. He says, now you are the body of Christ and individually members of it. In other words, he comes back and he says, let me remind you, we've been talking about a body and all this stuff, but what body are you part of? You're part of the body of Christ. Now, let me put you back in your proper context. We've been talking about all these body analogies. You are part of the body of Christ, but you're individual members of it. And God has appointed in the church, first apostles, second prophets, third teachers, then miracles, and then gifts of healing, helping, administration, and various kinds of tongues. All right? Now, this is interesting. After talking about there's no differentiation and everybody's the same, he now puts actually ordinal numbers on first this, second that, third this, then these, then these. And it creates almost like a hierarchy, and it does in a certain sense. And if you look at it, and we're going to see that he's going to talk about things not as these gifts are better gifts or less better gifts. He's always going to talk in terms of what is going to give the most edification and profitability. Now, watch how he does this. The apostles, prophets, and teachers, if you really think about it, what are their principal functions in the church?
Doctrine.
Okay, doctrine, teaching, truth, establishing it, bringing forth truth, handling it well, etc. So if you don't have truth, you don't have anything else that the rest of this stuff fits into. So he says, the apostles have established it, there's prophets that are bringing forth truth, and the teachers are taking and making sure you're being taught truth, right? So you got all of those things in that realm. So he says, you got to start with the foundation of truth. What is true? Who is God? All the other things that go along with it. And then he says, miracles and kinds of healing. And so he's kind of got a second grouping of things. These are very specific, very powerful things, right? Somebody's sick and they could be healed. That's kind of an important thing, right? And it's edification. He talks about it. We're going to see that he talks about how these gifts manifest themselves. Helping, healing, or helping, administration. So these are more serving type of gifts. Again, classification. And then various kinds of tongues. If you notice, because of the issue with tongues in Corinth, he still puts this one last again. Because what is this gift most profitable for? Unless there's interpretation. Personal. Me and God. That's how he's going to talk about it. Me and God, that's it. So it's not profitable and edifying to the body unless there's an interpreter. So he says, so if I'm going to put this, I want you to have truth, I want you to have power, I want you to have service, and then, oh, by the way, yes, there's personal interaction that comes along with that. And if there's interpretation that comes along with those tongues, which you guys are exalting way up here, remember, because that shows you how spiritual you are. Sounds familiar? Mm-hmm. I really have power. He puts it last. So again, it's what are things that are going to start being edification? If you don't have the foundation of truth to begin with, what's the rest of it going to mean? And what has their problem been with their application of truth? They have missed what? There's no truth in love, right? Which, oh, by the way, is what he's going to talk about next. If you don't have your love. So he then goes and he says, now let me point back to you guys. Well, are all prophets? Are all apostles? Are all teachers? Do all work miracles? Do all possess gifts of healing? Do all speak in tongues? Do all interpret? And of course, those are rhetorical questions. No, 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 and no. So anybody who says you have to be something to be spiritual, he's already saying, that's not true. But earnestly desire the higher gifts. So when he says higher gifts, is he saying, what's he really trying to say? Earnestly desire higher gifts. And there's a million ways those verbs, I'm not even going to go through all the way those things can be interpreted. What do you think he's trying to say in this context? What in this context would be a higher gift?
To have the gifts that edify the body.
Yeah.
Stop looking at personal.
Yeah, stop looking at your personal point. Yeah.
What's going to bless everybody else.
Yeah, the highest gifts are the gifts that are the ones that are going to be most profitable to the body. Now, can you have a high gift of service? Yeah. Can that be hugely profitable? Yeah. So in other words, when you start looking at these things, what is the most important thing? He's coming back. I want you to seek for the higher gifts, and the higher gifts are the ones that are going to be bringing profit and edification to the body. I'm not even sure he's saying, hey, you want to pray to be a prophet. Maybe, great, sure. Is that more important and edifying than tongues? Yeah, because he's going to put prophecy and tongues in juxtaposition in chapter 14.
Could you tend to say tongues with an interpreter could almost be prophecy?
Tongues with an interpreter could almost be prophecy. There is a possibility of that, but most of the descriptions that we have of tongues are very, very limited of what they are. Mostly it talks about, when Paul talks about in chapter 14, if I have a song, if I have a prayer, if I have something else, typically
And so
personal,
but not with the interpreter. But with the interpreter, can it?
It could be, but most often if the tongue is for edification, it's more likely I am sharing how I'm praising God through song or prayer or whatever in that tongue, because it doesn't talk about why would a tongue be individually prophesying that now there's just an interpreter. It's much more a personal type of thing, the way it's described. Generally speaking, yeah. Now, could it be possible? But see, here's where we run into problems. We start speculating beyond what we know, and we know very little about these things, and Paul gives us about that much. So I'm very hesitant to run off on doctrine on things that I have that much information on. Okay.
Then it could be two tongues with an interpreter. Neither one, quote, quote, has the gift of prophecy.
Yes, and if you don't have any gifting of prophecy, it really doesn't matter. Yeah. So again, if you look at these different aspects here, he's basically saying, look, I want you to understand things. I want you to have these higher gifts. Now, something that's important, and I want to bring this up before we close, is you can have a gift that is dormant, because we know that Paul tells Timothy to rekindle the gift that has been given to you. You can choose not to use it. And Paul is basically saying, Timothy, you're letting your giftedness lie fallow. And you can go see that in 1 Timothy 4:14 and 2 Timothy 1:6. He was given a gift. He has the gift. And he's saying you need to rekindle that gift. You need to grow in that gift, because you don't get that you're letting it lie fallow. So in other words, it is possible to, if you will, quench the spirit in a certain respect, ignore what God has given you. And sometimes you need to be stirred up and reminded. And he says, I want you to seek the benefit and profit of others. Now, there may be times in your life where you go, well, because of my life, I can't go do this. Okay, don't. But then don't just say, okay, the time's gone, I'm not going to do it anymore. Say, I don't know, God's given me this. I have right now the time I haven't been able to use this. Now I'm going to go use it. So go use it. Or maybe you're using it and you get in this position in life and God says, you need to be taking care of this, your family or your home or your parents or whatever. You need to back off, because that part of your ministry I want you to hold to the side because I have something else for you to do. But Timothy, don't sit here and forget about your gift. Rekindle it. Get going. Get off your tail. God's given you abilities. Go use them. And so finally, he then says, and I will show you a still more excellent way, which is going to lead up into chapter 13. But what's interesting about that is love is not a gift. Love is something that is a fruit of what? The Spirit. So the Spirit's still involved. And guess what? Who has that? Everybody who's a believer. Right, Catherine? Everybody. So he's now going to say the more excellent way, the way that is above and beyond, the way that puts everything in its proper context, is love. Wasn't the law summed up in love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself? So if you say, what can we all have? What can we all do? What context can we use all these gifts in? It's in love. And so Paul's now going to say, the reason he's going to give you the explanation of what is love, he's going to show, let me give you a big sweeping picture of what it looks like. Now ask yourself your question, guys using your gifts, are you using it like that? Is that how you're serving? Is that how you're teaching? Is that how you're speaking? Is that how you're whatevering? And if you're not doing it in love, with love, as love, you missed the point. Because that's what we all have. And without the all having that, the rest of the gifts don't mean anything, do they? All your knowledge is empty. And that's what Paul, in chapter 14, after he finishes 13, he's going to come back to that very thing. If I speak with the tongue of men and angels, right, and don't have that love, what am I? Clanging, banging, noisy, meaningless. Who cares what you can do without understanding what love looks like? That's why it is smack dab in the middle of this. So he now can show how that applies in chapter 14. So that's what we're going to pick up next week in our next lesson in chapter 13.